World of Dreams is my favorite mod of all time. The idea of some average person who has played the original DDLC gets transported into that world, but it's almost entirely different, and now you have to try and stop the tragedy that happens. It's great, it's such a good idea. I've played through a few mods that do something similar, where Monaco or the entire Literature Club will get transported to the real world, and then the main characters go back in the game so we can go fix stuff, but World of Dreams does this in such a special way. For those of you wondering, no, it's not an isekai. I mean, yeah, the player does get transported to the game, but it's so much more than that. Talking to these characters feels so real. It's grounded, it feels human, everything has weight and consequence. Alright, I think that's enough ranting, let's get into the mod. Oh yeah, only like 6% of you are subscribed, so please subscribe! Huge thank you to the channel Kanemonger, I'm not sure how you say it, but all the mods I find out about are thanks to them. So huge thank you, and I'll be using their footage as well, so yeah, please check them out. The story starts off calm, with the player just relaxing outside. In a short time, we're already given a lot about his character. He enjoys the calm and quiet house that he's left in, and enjoys these little things, like sipping a soda while he's just enjoying nature. We also learn that he loves his parents and wishes to have a relationship like theirs. Oh wow, look at that foreshadowing. We then cut to the main protagonist in a DDLC world, Meiji. We learn that he is a typical protagonist that doesn't like school and enjoys manga and anime because of course he does. We then get a scene that mimics the original DDLC intro with him noticing Sayori in the streets and is already aware of the literature club. But that night is when everything begins to change. The player wakes up in Meiji's room and quickly realizes he's in DDLC. He actually has a bit of knowledge about the game already and has played through a few mods himself, which is kind of interesting. The music here is honestly fantastic and really complements how the player is trying to stay calm and figure out the situation, all while panicking so much, but it's crazy how much of a clear head that he has right now. It's kind of weird, but I definitely relate to the player a lot already, since so far, with the things that I know of him, he is sort of like me, and the way that he is handling the situation is definitely how I would go about things. I too would try to keep a calm head and just venture out, but then again, I think everyone would too, especially if they get transported to another world. They're immediately gonna like, okay, we've seen this before, let's figure out the situation. I'm not sure if it was intentional or not for him to even be relatable, but it definitely helped me kind of almost self-insert myself, which made me more invested as time went on, since it felt like I was experiencing this alongside him, and we were kind of in this together, you know? Does that make sense? Am I weird? After a little bit of exploration, we actually find Meiji's parents, which is interesting already because in the original DDLC, there were no signs of any adult figures or parents. It was just the main four girls with the main character. After some good acting, they all return to bed, but the player starts to hear someone speak. It's Meiji inside the player's mind. Well, I guess it's actually Meiji's mind because the player is actually in Meiji's body with Meiji in the... We actually find out that his full name is actually Meiji Chisu, which is pretty funny because his initials are literally just MC. Good joke there, guys. The player suggests they hang out with Sayori on Sunday because the game is going to begin on Monday, so they need to have that time to start setting stuff up so we can save everyone. But Meiji seems very hesitant. He actually doesn't have any confidence in himself and he thinks he was weighing down Sayori, and that's why he stopped hanging out with her. It's actually a pretty realistic reason, I didn't expect it. They talk for a little bit longer and they go to sleep. The next morning we find out that Meiji tried to take control, but it didn't really work out, so sadly he's gonna be in the background for a little bit. They get ready for the day and they text Sayori. The banter and interaction between Meiji and the player is honestly great, and it's pretty funny. The player is such a huge jokester. We then meet Sayori, and my god, this world feels so alive. The music really helps with this, and I love every second of it. It's not entirely hard to write Sayori, she's just a dumb klutz, but the writing makes everyone feel so alive, and I can't help but smile watching all this play out. The way that Sayori feels so familiar yet so different makes you believe that yeah, this is the world of DDLC, but it's more real. It feels real. Even with Meiji's parents, they could easily just be a background thing, but they both have character and interests. I know I keep repeating myself, but I'm honestly just so impressed so far. There's only a handful of mods that really go above and beyond, and it's so great to get hooked in like this. The next day we walk with Sayori to school, learn that Meiji has a protagonist seat, because of course he does, and encounter someone who picks on Meiji. And for some reason the player decides to roast her and call her a few terrible words, which if I'd show you I would get demonetized, and then immediately compliments her? What? The difference between Meiji and the player is so different, with Meiji screaming for the player to stop while the player is just making the situation even worse. And apparently whatever the player did ended up working because we learned that the bully thought that teasing people was how to make friends. Okay, sure. That worked out. The next day, the player gets sick, so they end up relaxing and read the books they got from yesterday, which is Parfait Girls and Portrait of Markov, and we actually get to read some of it, which is pretty cool. The interaction with Meiji was also kind of intense. They've known each other for such a short amount of time, but seeing Meiji try to cheer up the player feels kind of out of character, but in a good way. Their friendship is definitely growing, and it's nice to see them work together, even in this whole weird situation where the player's just jammed into Meiji's body and Meiji can't control himself. Some time passes and Sayori ends up bringing the entire literature club to Meiji's house. After that, it's pretty much the same dialogue from the original DDLC, but with a few twists here and there, which is nice, because for people like me who already know the story, we've seen this scene multiple times, so it's nice to have it be somewhat different. It's also kind of unnerving how similar it is too, because remember, this is supposed to be a real world and not just a game. The next day comes around and the thought of telling everyone about the player is heavily considered. Meiji and him both agree that it's unfair to keep lying and maybe they can get help from Monika since she seems a bit self-aware already. But there's this lingering fear of what Monika will do. The player knows what happens in the game, so he doesn't want Monika to start messing with stuff and hurting the other girls right now. Cause it isn't until the end of the game that Monika has her epiphany. This scene had me at the edge of my seat because even I was left to questioning what would happen. The girls definitely wouldn't believe that the player is another personality, but maybe Sayori would believe in Meiji because they know each other for so long? And what if Monika rips away Meiji and deletes him so that way she can have the player with no strings attached? This whole thing is such a huge gamble and I can definitely see why the player is just so scared right now. We then go ahead and walk to school with Sayori and we see the bully again, and she apologizes, which is interesting, but at least it's cool to see that the player really is helping Meiji and the others, because that's one problem down. But another arises because there are more bullies. They all attack Yuri, but thankfully we all help her. This at least gives us a lot of hope, because for one, Monika seems to really care for Yuri, so at least we can trust her for now, I think. We then talk to the other characters for a little bit and get some world building, and finally move on to club stuff. We do a little bit more reading, which is always nice, and then we start to share poems. But before we do this, we have a very slight and intense interaction with Monika. Monika begins calling out the other club members, but I hold out my hand. Allow me. Sorry, Markiplier. Oh my god, I forgot about that scene. We tell Monika to come by our house, that way we can explain a few things, and her reaction is kinda tame. I mean, with her knowing that she's in a game, of course nothing's going to surprise her, but still, it's a little worrying. Nonetheless, we share poems and everyone's reaction to the player's poem is kind of crazy. They all feel so many different things from it and they all enjoy it in their own ways. It's actually pretty good that we can see everyone's personality with the way that they're describing the poems. But all that is cut short when we have the Natsuki and Yuri argument. Ah yes, everyone's favorite part. The player actually handles this in a very mature way and shows how smart he is. I was sort of confused at first because I felt like he was a bit too smart, because at one point he was like, Monika, do you know what an ad hominem attack is? And Monika was like, yeah, you attack the person at the top. And I was like, how the fuck did you know that? That's so random. There's a few moments like that here and there, but I guess it's alright. It's just a little distracting sometimes because like it just feels random at some points, but I think that's just me. It definitely is already established that yeah, he's pretty smart, he's pretty analytical, he's cool, he's awesome. But yeah, then again, we're only like 3 hours in the story, so of course right now it still feels a bit weird. The player then finally settles this by complimenting everyone's writing style, and you can definitely see that he's using the knowledge of the game to his advantage, which I like. And then something interesting happens. The player just tells everyone about himself, to everyone, that he isn't Meiji, which is crazy to do this now because we just had the argument, and then right when things are finally okay, you're just kind of like, alright, you know what, let's go back to the chaos. You could have picked a better time? Everyone's reaction to this just honestly hurts. Sayori cries and can't believe the person who wanted to connect with her again wasn't even Meiji in the first place. And then Natsuki slaps us for lying and for making Sayori cry. Then Monika pulls us outside the club and throws us against the wall and just yells at, like, it's all a lot. And it's just kind of like, damn, fuck. The player shouts that he can't live like this anymore, especially when Meiji is still in his mind. This isn't the player's life and he doesn't want to replace Meiji. He doesn't want to live for him. Monika can't help but cry. Monika just feels so betrayed. We're able to at least explain ourselves and get back to the club though. Things aren't pretty, but at least Yuri takes the initiative and seems to somewhat believe us. The player then pleads with Yuri, asking if she knows anything to let Meiji take control. She says there are possibly a few ways, and the player finally says something that I've had on my mind for a while. I know it isn't as easy as I think it is, but the player hasn't really given Meiji the chance to take control. The player says he's tried, but he kind of hasn't. And we finally know why. He doesn't want to be erased. What if Meiji does take control? Does the player just no longer exist? Because it is Meiji's body and his soul is still there and is fully conscious, but the player doesn't have anything to cling on. And if Meiji does take control, does that mean that the player goes back to his world and the girls are now doomed forever? With all these thoughts plaguing our minds, Sayori thankfully comforts us and tries to believe us. Meiji then tries again to take control, but the player doesn't let him. Whether that's because he's still scared or this is the right thing to do, I don't know. But it's more signs that the player isn't truly letting Meiji take back his body. Things are finally starting to look up now, and we finally end the club meeting. We have a bittersweet conversation with Sayori when we get home, with Monika already there waiting for us. We learn that she doesn't have a home apparently, and her parents kicked her out when she quit the debate club. We then call Meiji's parents to see if she can stay with us for a bit. Monika then gets changed, and we're reminded yet again that Monika is a vegetarian. Woo, yeah! Fun fact, this topic gets brought up in most mods, I I play and will be brought up a few times in this one. And that's fine, but I don't know why it is brought up so many times. I don't know, like first world problems, I play too many mods, wow, okay. Anyways, they make dinner and the player decides to sing Your Reality to Monica, and Monica doesn't take this too well. She tells us that she's been alone for so long and the knowledge that everyone around her are fakes just breaks her. She says that it's been so overwhelming that she knows that everyone's just following the game script and that she doesn't really know how to live anymore. It's actually pretty sad when she puts it that way because yeah, am I following a game script too? Are these thoughts not even my own? Like it's heartbreaking. This sad but sweet moment instantly turns around and the player recognizes Monica's smile from Act 3. We try and tell Monica that this world is as real as ours, but she doesn't seem to listen. She even says that it'd be easier to delete Meiji instead of trying to separate him from the player. The player then decides to show Monica the game and let her play it. And this kind of broke me. Their reaction to the game just hurt. Monica is left there shaking while Meiji is just speechless, trying to wrap his head around this. Meiji hates himself for letting Sayori die and not helping her. He vents out his frustrations and it just hurts. Monica definitely has it the worst though. Monica's traumatized. She can't believe what she turned into and what she has done. I can just hear Monica shouting, "Please don't delete me." It's so painful. After some time, everyone starts to calm down and things start to relax. But I think I'll end this video here. I know cliffhangers suck, but please go play this mod for yourself. It's honestly great and you won't regret it. Thanks for listening and hey, subscribe. Goodbye. The idea of some average person who has played the original DDLC gets transported